Ma'am, which floor are you headed?
28th, please. I live here.
What kind of work do you do?
I work in law at the federal courthouse.
Let me see some identification.
Here it is. Everything is correct. Doesn't look like you are detaining me without.
Ma'am.
The elevator doors closed slowly with a soft mechanical sound, trapping Judge Patricia Williams inside the small space along with two police officers, who had no idea that this moment was about to ruin their own lives. It was 9:15 on a Tuesday night, and Patricia was heading back home after an exhausting day at the federal courthouse. All day long, she had overseen serious cases that would decide the future of criminals, corrupt officials, and victims of civil rights violation. Patricia lived a quiet, private life in the upscale Meridian Towers apartment complex. It was the kind of place where residents paid high prices for safety, privacy, and the respectful treatment that usually came with wealth and status. But what was about to happen would completely destroy that sense of security and prove that even a federal judge dressed in her official robes was not protected from the deepest and ugliest forms of prejudice still present in American society. Security cameras would later record every painful second of an encounter that would end two police careers, trigger a federal investigation, and send shockwaves through the entire justice system. Before we go any further into this unbelievable story, take a moment to let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will leave you absolutely stunned. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Judge Patricia Williams had spent the last 16 years building a flawless reputation on the federal bench. At 53 years old, she was widely respected for her sharp legal thinking, strong sense of fairness, and the authority she carried in the courtroom. Lawyers, prosecutors, and fellow judges across the district all knew her as someone who took justice seriously and never wavered from her principles. Her path to becoming a federal judge was far from easy. She grew up in a working-class family and had to fight for every opportunity she received. Through hard work, determination, and exceptional skill, she excelled in law school, climbed the ranks in the prosecutor's office, and eventually earned her place on the federal bench. Nothing had been handed to her, she had earned everything. Patricia lived alone in apartment 2847 at Meridian Towers, a luxury high-rise filled with doctors, executives, and other professionals who valued privacy and discretion. She had moved there 5 years earlier, drawn by the promise of peace and quiet, a place where she could unwind after the pressure-filled days of federal court. Building management took pride in offering residents a safe haven, complete with a 24-hour concierge, private elevator access, and strict rules to keep unauthorized people off residential floors. That Tuesday evening had been especially draining. Patricia had worked for more than 12 hours, reviewing complicated fraud cases, listening to arguments in a high-profile corruption trial, and writing legal opinions that would impact thousands of lives. She was completely worn out and looking forward to something simple changing. Out of her judicial robes, ordering dinner, and reading before going to bed, she had no idea that her calm night was about to turn into a nightmare that would reveal the worst side of police misconduct and racial profiling. Officers Marcus Rodriguez and Kevin Thompson had been dispatched to respond to a noise complaint on the 14th floor. A resident had reported loud music coming from apartment 1426. Building security had called for police help after their own attempts to handle the situation failed. Rodriguez, a 7-year veteran, and Thompson, who had been on the force for 12 years, had answered dozens of similar calls before. This was supposed to be routine, just another ordinary stop with no drama. But everything went wrong the moment they entered the building. The concierge on duty, a young man named David Chen who had only been working nights for 3 weeks, made a serious mistake that would set off a disastrous chain of events. When the officers asked about the noise complaint, Chen misunderstood them and directed them to the wrong floor. Instead of heading to the 14th floor where the complaint actually came from, Rodriguez and Thompson took the elevator to the 28th floor, where Judge Patricia Williams lived in complete silence. The elevator ride that would change everything started out harmless enough. Patricia entered first, pressed the button for her floor, and leaned back against the wall while holding her briefcase and purse. She was still wearing her black judicial robe, choosing to change at home instead of at the courthouse. The robe represented her authority and the respect she had earned over decades, but it would offer her no protection against what was coming. Rodriguez and Thompson stepped into the elevator just before the doors closed. They noticed Patricia right away, their eyes scanning her in a way she had learned to recognize all too well over the years. She gave them a polite nod, the kind of simple courtesy common in professional buildings, but neither officer acknowledged her. Instead, They positioned themselves in a way that made the already small elevator feel tight and threatening. Patricia pressed herself gently against the back wall, quiet defensive reaction shaped by years of navigating spaces where her presence seemed to make others uneasy. It was a feeling she had experienced many times before throughout her career, and once again, it had found her in the most unexpected place. That feeling, the moment when she could sense someone silently questioning whether she truly belonged in a certain place or position, was familiar to Patricia. She had lived with it for years, but this time felt different. This wasn't the quiet, subtle disrespect she had learned to tolerate in professional spaces. This felt sharper, more aggressive, and far more threatening. As the elevator slowly moved upward, Officer Rodriguez broke the silence with a question that immediately made Patricia uneasy. He asked her what floor she was going to, even though she had already pressed the button, and the elevator display clearly showed it was headed to the 28th floor. On the surface, it sounded harmless, but his tone carried suspicion that made her heart beat faster. She answered calmly, explaining that she lived on the 28th floor and was heading home from work. Rodriguez and Thompson exchanged a look that Patricia noticed out of the corner of her eye. It was silent, but clear, a shared reaction that suggested they didn't fully believe her. Then Thompson asked what kind of work she did. The question had no real reason behind it. It wasn't casual curiosity. It felt like a challenge, as if she needed to justify her right to be there. Patricia paused for a brief moment, carefully considering how to respond. She could say she worked in law, which was true but vague. She could say she was a federal judge, which might immediately shift the situation, but could also sound like she was trying to pull rank. Or she could refuse to answer altogether, reminding them she didn't owe strangers personal details. She chose a balanced approach, explaining that she worked in the legal field and was coming home from the federal courthouse. It was honest, respectful, and non-confrontational. Instead of easing the tension, her answer only seemed to deepen their suspicion. Rodriguez stepped closer, invading her personal space, and making the small elevator feel even tighter and more threatening. As the elevator continued to rise, each passing floor should have brought her closer to the safety of home. Instead, it felt like she was being pulled deeper into a confrontation that was quickly spiraling out of control. Patricia could feel the tension building. Years on the federal bench had sharpened her awareness of power dynamics and warning signs of escalation. Every instinct she had told her that these officers were searching for a reason to detain her. Something was very wrong, and she could sense it clearly. What happened next was recorded in sharp detail by the elevator's security camera. That footage would later become undeniable proof of an encounter that shocked the legal world and exposed how deeply racial profiling still existed within law enforcement. Thompson moved even closer, positioning himself directly in front of Patricia. The fluorescent lights reflected off his badge as he demanded to see her identification. He claimed that building security had reported suspicious activity on the upper floors. The lie came easily, practiced, and smooth, the kind of excuse that dishonest officers had used for decades to harass innocent people. Patricia knew instantly that no such report existed. Still, she understood how dangerous the situation had become inside that small, enclosed space. Keeping her voice calm, she reached into her purse and handed Thompson her driver's license. Her hands remained steady, even as adrenaline surged through her body. Thompson examined the ID far longer than necessary, as if searching for something that wasn't there. He then showed it to Rodriguez, who compared the photo to Patricia's face like he was matching a suspect to a mugshot. The license clearly listed her address as apartment 2847 in Meridian Towers, confirming that she lived exactly where she said she did. But instead of returning her identification and admitting the mistake, Thompson slipped the license into his pocket. He told Patricia they needed to verify her residency with building management. It was another lie, another excuse to keep the encounter going when it should have ended immediately. Patricia's legal training kicked in instantly. She recognized the constitutional violations happening in real time. She was being detained without probable cause, questioned without justification, and now had her identification taken without legal authority. Yet she also knew how risky it could be to challenge police officers directly, especially in a confined space. She had seen countless cases where standing up for one's rights led to accusations of resisting arrest or worse. Suddenly, Rodriguez pressed the emergency stop button. The elevator jerked to a sudden halt between the 22nd and 23rd floor, causing Patricia to stumble slightly before bracing herself against the wall. She was now trapped in a space barely 6 feet by 4 feet, with no witnesses and no immediate way to escape or call for help. With the elevator frozen in place, Thompson continued his questioning. He asked why she was coming home so late, and whether she had been drinking, pushing the situation even further into dangerous territory. The questions were meant to humiliate her, to strip her of dignity and make her feel like a criminal suspect instead of a federal judge coming home after a long day of delivering justice. Still, Patricia answered each question with calm professionalism. She explained that federal court often ran late and that she had been working on case opinions right up until she left the courthouse. Her composure seemed to frustrate the officers. It was clear they had expected her to react emotionally or become defensive. When she didn't, Rodriguez accused her of being evasive, claiming her answers sounded rehearsed and suspicious. He went even further, suggesting she might be involved in illegal activity inside the building, hinting at things like drug dealing or prostitution. The accusations were so offensive and outrageous that Patricia had to hold herself back from responding with the anger she felt rising inside. Any innocent person would have felt insulted by such degrading treatment, but she knew reacting emotionally could make things worse. Thompson then pulled out his radio and began speaking to dispatch. He reported that they had detained a suspicious individual who was trying to gain unauthorized access to the residential floors. Every word he said was a lie. But Patricia immediately realized what he was doing. He was creating a false story to justify whatever they planned to do next. She also understood the dangerous reality that, in situations like this, an officer's word often carried more weight than a civilian's. At that moment, Patricia made a decision that would later prove critical. She quietly activated the voice recording app on her phone, which she was already holding after checking messages earlier. The phone rested naturally at her side, and the officers didn't notice that she had begun recording everything they said. Years in the legal system had taught her how important evidence was, and she instinctively knew that an audio record might be her only protection against false charges. Rodriguez then demanded that Patricia empty her purse onto the elevator floor, claiming they needed to search it for weapons or illegal items. This demand crossed yet another constitutional line. They had no probable cause and no warrant to search her belongings. Patricia calmly refused, stating that she had done nothing wrong and that they had no legal authority to search her personal items. Her refusal seemed to infuriate Thompson. Without warning, he grabbed her purse and dumped everything onto the elevator floor himself. Her wallet, keys, makeup, medication, and personal belongings scattered across the small space. Among the items was her federal judicial identification card, clearly identifying her as the Honorable Patricia Williams, United States District Judge for the Northern District. Thompson picked up the card and stared at it for several seconds. His face shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to visible panic. He handed it to Rodriguez, whose reaction was even more alarming. The color drained from Rodriguez's face as the truth hit him. They had just detained, harassed, and illegally searched a federal judge, the very kind of person whose courtroom they could one day stand in as defendants. This should have been the moment they stopped, apologized, and ended the encounter. Instead, they made a choice that turned a devastating mistake into a criminal act. Thompson claimed the judicial ID was fake, accusing Patricia of illegally obtaining it to impersonate a federal judge. Rodriguez agreed, saying someone like her couldn't possibly hold such an important position, and that they needed to arrest her for fraud and impersonation of a federal official. Their words revealed the depth of their racial bias and their inability to accept that a black woman could hold one of the most powerful positions in the American legal system. Even when faced with clear proof of her identity, their prejudice blinded them to the truth. They chose to believe in an elaborate crime rather than admit they had targeted someone who outranked them in every way. Patricia's voice remained steady as she informed them that her detention was illegal. The search was unconstitutional, and their accusations were defamatory. She warned them that continuing down this path would lead to federal charges and the complete destruction of their careers. But her warnings went ignored. The officers had already committed to a course of action that would end their professional lives. Thompson radioed for backup, reporting that they had arrested a suspect for impersonating a federal judge and requesting additional units to transport her to jail for booking. This radio call would later become key evidence in the federal investigation, proving that the officers chose to double down on their lies instead of admitting their mistake. Rodriguez restarted the elevator, but instead of letting Patricia go to her apartment, he directed it toward the ground floor, where more officers would be waiting. As the elevator descended, Patricia continued recording every word, fully aware that this audio evidence would be crucial in exposing the officers' misconduct and the complete lack of any legal justification for what they were doing. The elevator reached the ground floor with a cold mechanical ding, a sound that might as well have been the final nail in Rodriguez and Thompson's careers. As the door slid open, Patricia came face to face with 4 more officers who had rushed in because of Thompson's fake emergency call. The Meridian Tower's lobby was usually calm marble floors, soft lights, quiet voices, But in seconds, it turned into chaos. Police radios crackled, officers moved quickly, and the peaceful atmosphere disappeared. It became the exact kind of scene residents paid high prices to never deal with. Detective Sarah Mitchell stepped forward first. With 15 years on the job, she could tell immediately that something was off. She had worked with Rodriguez and Thompson before and knew them as capable officers. But what she was seeing didn't make sense. A well-dressed woman in professional clothing was being treated like a dangerous criminal. Her personal items were scattered from the elevator, and her dignity was being torn apart in front of staff and residents who had stepped out to see what was happening. Patricia walked out of the elevator with the same calm confidence she carried in her courtroom every day. Even after nearly 20 minutes of harassment, illegal detention, and racist accusations, she refused to fall apart. She stayed composed, steady, controlled, and professional. Her calm energy made Rodriguez and Thompson look even worse, because they were giving off the opposite vibe: loud, aggressive, and clearly desperate to explain themselves now that witnesses were watching. Detective Mitchell approached Patricia in a steady, respectful tone and asked for her side of the story. It was obvious Mitchell could sense something didn't match up. The officer's claims didn't fit the scene in front of her eyes. Patricia calmly handed over her judicial identification card. Mitchell studied it carefully under the bright lobby lights, and her expression changed instantly. You could see it on her face, realization. Those were real federal credentials, and they belonged to someone with serious authority. Thompson jumped in right away, insisting the ID was fake. He demanded that Mitchell arrest Patricia for impersonating a federal judge. His voice had a shaky edge to it, the kind of panic people hear when someone knows they've messed up badly, but they're too proud or too stubborn to admit it. Rodriguez backed him up, adding extra details to their made-up story. He talked about suspicious behavior, false credentials, and a resident trying to sneak into upper floors. But Detective Mitchell wasn't buying it. She pulled out her phone and made a call that would seal both officers' fate. Within minutes, she reached the federal courthouse and confirmed everything. Patricia Williams wasn't just real, she was a sitting federal judge, and she had been presiding over cases earlier that same day. The person on the other end of the call sounded shocked and disturbed that a judge had been detained and harassed, and they made it clear this would be investigated at the highest level. The lobby went quiet when Mitchell ended the call. She turned to Rodriguez and Thompson, her voice calm but ice-cold. She told them straight, Patricia Williams was a federal judge. Her credentials were real, and what they had done, detaining her and treating her this way, was a serious federal civil rights violation that would be handled to the full extent of the law. The color drained from both officers' faces. For the first time, reality finally broke through their racist assumption. That's when Patricia revealed something that made the situation even worse for them. She calmly told everyone that she had recorded the entire encounter, from the first questions in the elevator to the harassment that continued even after they found her judge ID. Everything had been captured in clear audio, every word, every threat, every illegal move, and she would be handing it all to federal investigators. Her recording would prove one thing loud and clear: this wasn't real police work. This was racial bias and abuse of power. Then the building's security director, James Walsh, came out of his office with a serious look and a laptop in his hands. He explained that the elevator cameras had captured the whole incident in high-definition video. The footage showed Rodriguez and Thompson harassing a resident with no real reason, dumping her belongings, searching her illegally, and then making up charges once they realized who she was. Now the pressure was building fast. Word of what happened had already reached top levels in both the police department and the federal judiciary. Patricia's phone started ringing calls from fellow judges, court staff, and legal colleagues who had heard what was happening. Each call made it harder for the department to cover anything up. The system was watching now, and everyone knew it. Rodriguez made one last, desperate attempt to save himself. He tried to claim Patricia had somehow provoked the situation, or that what they did was normal police procedure. But his words didn't land. Not in a lobby full of witnesses. Not with video footage, not with audio recordings. No one with common sense could watch that evidence and still believe Patricia had done anything wrong. She had only been trying to go home after work. Detective Mitchell then did something rare, something serious. She placed both Rodriguez and Thompson under immediate arrest for federal civil rights violation. Right there in the same lobby where they had tried to humiliate a federal judge, their badges and weapons were taken from them, and they were handcuffed in front of everyone. No one in the lobby missed the irony of the moment. The same officers who had tried to strip an innocent woman of her dignity and freedom were now experiencing that exact humiliation themselves. Handcuffed, exposed, and powerless, Rodriguez and Thompson stood where they had moments earlier tried to assert control. Within hours, news crews began arriving. Tips had come in from courthouse staff and legal insiders who immediately understood how serious this incident was. Federal judges almost never found themselves on the wrong end of police encounters, and when it happened, it meant something had gone terribly wrong inside law enforcement. Reporters gathered outside Meridian Towers, eager to speak with residents and witnesses who had seen the shocking events unfold inside the building's elegant lobby. Patricia chose not to speak to the media that night. Instead, she focused on documenting everything and consulting with civil rights attorneys who specialized in police misconduct cases. She knew that how she responded would set an important precedent. Rather than chasing headlines or public sympathy, she decided to let the legal system handle the matter properly. It was a clear reflection of her belief in justice and due process, not trial by media. The police department's internal affairs unit launched an investigation immediately, but it didn't stay in their hands for long. When a federal judge is illegally detained and harassed, it becomes a matter of national importance. Within 24 hours, the FBI opened a full civil rights investigation, and federal prosecutors began reviewing the evidence to determine criminal charges. When investigators reviewed the security footage and audio recordings, they were stunned. The evidence was clear, detailed, and impossible to deny. Rarely had they seen such an obvious case of racial profiling and civil rights violations, supported by both video and audio proof. There was no room for excuses or misinterpretation. Even more troubling, the evidence suggested this wasn't an isolated incident. Investigators saw patterns in the officers' behavior that raised serious concerns they may have treated other people the same way people who didn't have Patricia's legal knowledge, authority, or ability to protect themselves. News of the incident spread quickly through the legal community. Judges, attorneys, and court staff reacted with anger and disbelief. If a federal judge could be treated this way, what chance did an average citizen have when facing officers driven by bias instead of the law? The case exposed deep and ongoing problems with racial profiling and highlighted the urgent need for stronger accountability in policing. Patricia's fellow judges stood firmly behind her. Several issued public statements condemning the officers' actions and calling for meaningful reforms. They understood that an attack on one judge was an attack on the integrity and independence of the entire judicial system. Meanwhile, Meridian Towers management found itself under scrutiny. The building had promised residents safety, respect, and protection from harassment. The fact that police officers were able to detain and humiliate a resident inside the building raised serious concerns. Management responded quickly, changing policies to require police officers to be escorted by security and to provide clear justification for any contact with residents. As the story continued to spread, one thing became clear: Rodriguez and Thompson's careers were finished. No police department would ever hire officers caught on camera illegally detaining a federal judge. Their actions created legal and financial consequences that would follow them for life. The case soon became a teaching example in police academies and law schools, showing how racism, arrogance, and poor judgment can destroy careers and violate constitutional rights. Federal prosecutors moved fast. Given the strength of the evidence and the seriousness of the case, they filed multiple charges, including deprivation of civil rights under color of law, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to violate constitutional rights. Each charge carried serious prison time, with potential sentences totaling up to 16 years. The case sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies across the country. It sent a clear message: racial profiling and abuse of power would not be tolerated no matter who the victim was. Patricia's decision to document the encounter and pursue justice protected countless future victims who might otherwise have suffered in silence. The federal trial became a landmark civil rights case. After just 4 hours of jury deliberation, Rodriguez and Thompson were found guilty on all counts. The evidence was overwhelming. Both officers received the maximum sentence, 16 years in federal prison. Their convictions echoed across police departments nationwide, serving as a powerful warning that racism and misconduct carry real consequences. Judge Patricia Williams turned her painful experience into purpose. She became a leading advocate for police accountability and judicial reform. She founded an organization dedicated to documenting and preventing racial profiling, ensuring victims had access to legal resources and support. Her courage inspired others to stand up against discrimination, even when the cost was high. The Meridian Towers incident became required study material in law schools and police academies across America, a perfect storm of racism, arrogance, and abuse of power that destroyed 2 careers but strengthened the fight for civil rights. Rodriguez and Thompson learned too late that in America, justice doesn't bow to badges or uniforms. When constitutional rights are violated, This case was brutal. But the next case is even more insane.